Brian Ortega is back in the win column. He proves everybody wrong, getting what I think is the biggest upset of the year so far. And we also have Brandon Moreno looking like he had just got knocked out in the back room before he fought, because he looked incredibly skittish, scared to engage, and it was the strangest Brandon Moreno performance I've seen throughout his whole career. And I'm going to talk about the main event, which in my opinion was underwhelming. Yes, Royval did his thing, but Moreno just looked so unbelievably strange in that fight. He was literally trying to win it with a little overhand and a leg kick, and that's basically it. We're going to get into it. That's not the only take I have on that fight, but I really want to discuss Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez first, because Brian Ortega has been the laughingstock of the 145-pound weight class for the past few years. He's been the guy that's been squatting on his ranking spot, inactive, riddled with injuries. It looked like his career was completely done because he's bouncing off of 2 losses, right? He loses to Volk, takes a year off. He comes back, fights Yair Rodriguez, loses, gets injured in the process, takes a year and a half off. Who in their right mind would trust him to win this fight, especially when Yair Rodriguez, let's be honest, even though he lost to Volkanovski, I mean, he beat Ortega the first time. He seems like the guy that's more hungry, that's more relevant in the featherweight division. And Yair was beating the fuck out of Ortega early. Yair, I think, is the first guy to ever drop Brian Ortega. He drops him twice. He beats the shit out of him in the first round. Oh my goodness, I didn't even mention it, but Ortega injured himself while Bruce Buffer was announcing his name. I think he rolled his ankle, which was crazy. I didn't even see it. I was putting in the timestamps on my phone and my chat starts going bonkers. Either way, Ortega gets 10-8'd in the first. But Yair's fight IQ, nonetheless, even in that first round, was so atrocious. Yair follows up Ortega to the ground after he drops him a second time. He starts utilizing his ground and pound, and I see people in my chat saying, too easy. This is so easy for Yair. The next thing you know, Ortega reverses the position, gets on top of Yair, and starts to take the wind out of Yair's sails, right? The round ends, second round hits. Ortega marches across the octagon like a zombie, taking punishment, gets his hands on Yair Rodriguez, picks him up, slams him on the ground with a blast double leg, dominates the whole round, and this is really where he answered so many questions, because ultimately, the question I had with Ortega was, if Ortega takes a grappling-first approach, will he be able to dominate on the ground? Will he be able to find a submission starting from, point A, meaning take someone down, work into half guard, work into a dominant position, and then search for a submission, look for ground and pound? And he passed the test with flying colors. Brian Ortega slugs himself across the octagon, gets a hold of Yair Rodriguez in the second round, picks him up, literally picks him up, slams him down, beats the shit out of him with ground and pound, takes more wind out of his sails, rinse and repeat in the third, puts Yair up against the fence, takes him down, works his way into a dominant position, and smudges Yair into a head and arm triangle, which Yair doesn't even try to fight. Taps, and that's it. Yair Rodriguez is such a pushover in the grappling, dude. I'm literally never going to pick him against a grappler ever again. But credit to Brian Ortega. People have been shitting on this guy's skills. Yes, striking-wise, he's not that great. He takes a shitload of damage. He's a little bit slow. I'm not going to act like out-grappling Yair is that impressive, but Ortega has taken down Volk. He's taken down Max. He's taken down everyone he's really tried to take down. And here we see how his ground and pound looks. We see that he has good control, and we see that he can smudge someone into a submission and work into a dominant position from square one, rather than just getting a reactionary submission. And I honestly think that Ortega's wrestling is underrated. Of course, Yair Rodriguez is basically a twig, and he's very easy to manipulate. And it's kind of crazy because he's so talented. He really is. What is holding him back? I mean, Yair's been in the UFC for 10 years, it seems. This has been his Achilles heel for forever, and he still can't do a damn thing about grapplers. Max Holloway beat him up on the ground. We saw Volkanovski beat him up on the ground. Frankie Edgar back in the day TKO'd him on the ground, and now we see Brian Ortega ragdoll him. I don't want to take away credit from Ortega, though, because I do think his wrestling is pretty decent. He's obviously a great grappler. It's awesome that he won tonight. I could tell that there was something that was different about Ortega in the build-up to this fight. He seems like he had a moment of reckoning in the offseason. Honestly, it looks like he's hungry. It looks like he's motivated again. And his body held up, even though he almost got injured before the fight even started, or he basically did roll his ankle. Ortega gets it done. But listen, guys, Brian Ortega, and people are not going to like this, but it's the truth, and the same people that aren't going to like this are the ones that were telling me that I shouldn't be talking about double champ fights when it comes to Ilia Topuria. Brian Ortega does not deserve a title shot, all right? This guy is coming off of 2 losses in a row. He's been the most inactive fighter in the UFC throughout the past 5 years. The last time he won before tonight was before Alex Pereira even made his UFC debut. Pereira has had a whole career since Ortega had his last win before this. 1 win over the guy that just beat you, and before he lost to Yair in that first fight, he lost to Volk. 1 win after 3 years of being inactive, sitting on a ranking spot, does not grant you a title fight. And don't try to sit here and act like you're super excited for Ortega versus Ilia Topuria. Fuck that. Yet if I say I want Ilia to fight Islam Makhachev, or if I say I want Ilia to fight Evloev instead, people are going to clown me. I either want to see Ortega fight Evloev, which is a fascinating matchup. Evloev doesn't have a ton of power. Ortega is super durable. Ortega has power, right? Evloev has the output. On the ground, you have a phenomenal chain wrestler with good control and good ground and pound versus a guy with really good jiu-jitsu who also has great grappling in Brian Ortega. That's an amazing stylistic matchup. If there's no clear-cut number 1 contender, because everyone before tonight was talking about Yair and how he's going to head kick KO Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria would have submitted Yair Rodriguez in the first round. Okay? He would have subbed him in the first. I don't want to see Brian Ortega, who just got dropped twice by Yair Rodriguez, fight Ilia Topuria, who could probably chin him in the first 2. I don't need to see that. It's not that interesting, and Ortega doesn't deserve it. It's great that Ortega's back in the win column. It's a wholesome moment. Good for him, but dude, this guy needs to do more work. He should fight Evloev in a number 1 contenders match, or you could do Ortega versus maybe someone like, I don't know, who else is up there? You could do Ortega versus Diego Lopez if Diego Lopez beats Sadiq Youssef. That would be a phenomenal fight. Also interesting stylistic matchup. Or maybe Ortega versus Aljo or some shit, but I want Aljo to fight Volk, okay? Volk and Aljo is the fight to make. But let's not act like Ortega earned his title shot, man. Like, he's taken a year and a half off in between every single fight. He's won 1, he's lost 1, he's won 1, he's lost 1. He's had 2 title fights already after 1 win each. Like, no. I'd rather see Evloev fight Topuria next. I don't think he necessarily deserves it, but at least he's not gotten dog-walked in title fights before. At least he's not been the most inactive fighter ever. At least he still technically is undefeated, even though I think he lost to Arnold Allen. Hell, I wouldn't even mind seeing Ortega versus Arnold Allen next. I think that's a good fight to make. But ultimately, no, he does not deserve a title shot. What the fuck? The whole reason why people don't like the idea of Ilia moving up to fight Makhachev or O'Malley moving up to fight Ilia, specifically talking about the featherweight division where people think there's some kind of a logjam, is because they don't think that Ilia has earned the right to fight Makhachev. They don't think that O'Malley has earned the right to get away from having to defend his title as a champion. And I get that. But let's not pretend that Ortega deserves a title shot on merit. He's bouncing off of 2 losses. The featherweight division is not just the every time Ortega wins, he gets a title shot division. Fuck that. Okay? And Ortega doesn't just all of a sudden have this unbeatable mystique about him. None of you guys would pick him to beat Topuria. Let's keep building up contenders in this division. Him versus Evloev or him versus Arnold Allen if you want to do Evloev versus Topuria. That's what we should do. Good win for Ortega, though. And I'm honestly happy to see him get the job done. For Yair, I don't think he's ever going to improve his grappling. I know that sounds kind of doom and gloom, but it is the truth. I don't think there's anything this guy's going to do to really get that much better. He's been around for 10 years. Like, it's kind of over. And I think that it's not over for him when it comes to striking battles. He still looked good when it was just a stand-up battle. But against these grapplers, we have no reason to believe that he can fix his problem, which is the takedown defense and the grappling in general. And he's also just kind of weak. So there's that. Let's get on to the co-main event. The moment Brandon Moreno walked out, I knew that there was something up. And I was saying to my chat, I guess he's trying to bide his time in the first round when Royval has, the quick twitch flying knee ability to get a KO out of nowhere. And don't worry, he looked super patient and reserved in the Kai Kara France fight, and then he started warming up and he eventually TKO'd him and started scrapping with him. But it never got better. Moreno's whole game plan in this fight, maybe it wasn't his game plan, but everything that he did in this fight was just duck underneath something and throw an overhand and land a low kick behind it. That was it. Overhand, low kick, once every minute. That was basically it. Every now and then, Moreno would try to engage in the grappling and the clinch, but he wasn't really imposing his will that much there either. And that was the story of the fight. I gave Moreno the first round. You could give him the second, but Brandon Royval won the last three clearly because Moreno was omitting offense. Like, he lost this fight via sin of omission. Like, he just didn't do enough. He didn't do a lot. He wasn't biting down on the mouthpiece. He wasn't pushing the pace. And I didn't see a guy that was totally gassed out. I saw a guy that from the moment the fight started was skittish and looked very worried about engaging. And that's why I brought up the idea that, who knows, did this guy get KO'd in training a couple weeks ago? Is that why? It was strange. Very strange. And I understand Royval got a victory here when it was an upset. And Royval's a dog. He's a dog. I like Brandon Royval. He had a phenomenal speech afterwards, and he's a fun flyweight. But I'm sorry, dude. Sticking behind a little pitter-pat jab is not the most impressive thing I've ever seen. It's not like a Merab Dvalishvili and Anthony Hernandez cardio showcase. Yes, in the later rounds, he was letting his hands go, and he was letting go these like 8-piece combinations. But for the most part, he won this fight by just flicking out a little pitter-pat jab. And I just don't think it's that crazy to keep up a decent pace like that. Now, to be fair, we were at altitude in Mexico City. Again, how come Yair Rodriguez gets dog-walked in Mexico City? But I'm not going to take away that much from Royval. He capitalized on a hesitant Brandon Moreno. From the moment the fight started, he was putting a pace on Moreno. It was hard for him to hit Moreno early. But hey, if you're starting to impose your will, you can take it to someone. You can start to gas them out. You can start to break their will a little bit. And I think that that's what we saw. As the fight progressed, Moreno's confidence waned. Royval's confidence picked up. He started to land more flush shots. He started to be more comfortable getting in on close range, taking the power of Brandon Moreno. And he did a really good job stuffing takedowns in this fight as well. And I was saying that Moreno is so much stronger. Royval's a bit of a pipsqueak, and I think Moreno can muscle him around. And that wasn't necessarily the case. So, good win for Brandon Royval. I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of happy because I was worried that if Moreno had won, we would have seen another fight with him and Pantoja. And I think that even though Royval wins, we're not going to see a trilogy with him and Pantoja anytime soon. So we don't get to see the 1,000,000th Brandon Moreno title fight, which I'm kind of okay with. But I'm not just going to sit here and act like it was a total domination, a leveling up performance from Brandon Royval. He looked like Brandon Royval that I'm used to seeing with a little bit better takedown defense. He took this fight on short notice. He had a good gas tank. He was the guy that was the hungrier one, that was pushing the pace, and he deserves this win 100%. But Moreno just honestly looked like he didn't even want to be in there. This is not the guy that I'm used to seeing. You cannot tell me that we saw this Brandon Moreno fight Pantoja, or we saw this Brandon Moreno fight Royval the first time, or any of the Figueiredos that we saw. Moreno is the guy that gets in people's faces, bites down on the mouthpiece, and goes tit for tat and tries to impose his will. We didn't see it. Where were the kicks? He was hardly throwing anything other than a little calf kick every once in a while. Where was the creativity, man? It was just overhands, and that's it. He was hardly throwing his jab. He wasn't putting together combinations. It was a very frustrating fight to watch, but Royval looked good in the later rounds, especially. As I said, he started putting combinations together. Honestly, it looked like he was just bitching Brandon Moreno around. On to the next one, Daniel Zellhuber versus Francisco Prado. Daniel Zellhuber gets it done. I picked him to win this fight via decision. And even though it was a competitive first round, and even though Francisco Prado was looking like the Argentinian Drew Dober with the exact same build, identical to Drew Dober, the density maxing was not enough for him. And Daniel Zellhuber was able to keep this fight at range, behind a jab, front kicks, and he completely minced up and butchered the face of Marcin Prado. So good fight for Daniel Zellhuber, promising prospect. I'd like to see him get a pretty big bump up in competition. You know, maybe someone like Jared Gordon, or hell, even Paddy Pimblett would be fun. Let's not act like Paddy Pimblett, just because he beat Tony Ferguson and Tony Ferguson's famous, necessarily is beyond the Daniel Zellhubers of the world. On to the next one, Manuel Torres versus Chris Duncan. Excellent fight, and Manuel Torres is slowly but surely becoming one of my favorite fighters. Completely ragdolled Chris Duncan after Chris Duncan tried to take him down. Gets the submission. The big difference here was, you know, we had one guy looking for a classic British man's decision, and we had another guy looking for a KO and a submission at every single waking second of this fight. And that's why I like watching Manuel Torres so much, because he's always looking for finishes, and he knows how to impose his will. And this is his fourth first-round finish in a row. The third first-round finish in a row in the UFC. He's a monster. Be on the lookout. He's got phenomenal Muay Thai. We know that he can submit guys now. And Chris Duncan, again, decision merchant, lands a good right hand early on. That was his one chance to get the knockout, and Manuel Torres ate it and got the win. Let's get on to the next one. Raul Barcelos gets the job done over Christian Quinones. Despite him getting KO'd by Umar Nurmagomedov, he's back in the win column. He had a good, crafty-looking performance. This was a phenomenal fight. It was boring early on, and I was afraid that we were going to see another horrible decision, lots of grappling like we had seen early on in the night. But Raul Barcelos and Quinones went to war in the second, had a phenomenal back and forth, and then we saw Raul Barcelos get a submission in the third round. Crafty man, Barcelos is back in the win column. Don't really know what's next for him, but yeah, that was a good fight. Jesus Aguilar beats Mateus Mendoza. I did pick Mendoza to get this one done. Horrible fight. Atrocious fight. Jesus Aguilar and Mateus Mendoza were just shooting nonstop takedowns on each other. Both of them weren't really able to do anything with it. And Jesus Aguilar gets it done by a split decision via landing a little more pitter-pat shots than Mateus Mendoza. Good win for T-Rex Arms Aguilar, the shortest reach in the UFC. Edgar Chairez versus Daniel Lacerda, like clockwork, like it's supposed to be. Okay, Edgar Chairez beats Daniel Lacerda for the second time in a row via submission in the first round for the second time in a row. Daniel Lacerda still unable to get a win in the UFC. I think that this was his last one. He's probably going to get cut. I think he's lost like 5 times in the UFC. And Edgar Chairez is showing a really well-rounded game. But again, it's a guy that's got beaten every single one of his UFC fights that's just not really UFC caliber. We're going to need to see him take a bump up in competition. But Chairez is entertaining. He's got decent striking. He's got a decent submission game. So I still like watching him fight quite a bit. Let's get on to the next one. Firas Ziam versus Claudio Puelles. I did pick Claudio Puelles to get this one done. And this was also an atrocious fight. All right, we saw Claudio Puelles rack up tons of control time. It looked like he was going to be ragdolling Twig Man Ziam early on, who's built like a twig. But he couldn't get the submission. Claudio Puelles, the submission expert, in dominant positions throughout the entirety of the fight, cannot for the life of him land any ground and pound. He cannot for the life of him get close to a submission. And it's honestly kind of crazy to me how, like, you could be such a good grappler, dedicate your life to MMA, and, you know, we can't see any ground and pound. I mean, that's literally how Firas Ziam won this fight, because there were moments where he would maybe get the better of a grappling exchange, and he would have a 30-second moment where he would land some ground and pound shots. And because Claudio Puelles did such little in terms of damage throughout the fight, every single round, Firas Ziam's couple of pitter-pat shots were able to do enough to win each round. So, good win for Twigman Firas Ziam. Claudio Puelles if you're not going to beat Ziam, who has absolutely no finishing power, and you can also toss around like a ragdoll, I just don't see how he's going to get far in the UFC at all. So let's get on to the next one. Denise Bondar, Ronaldo Rodriguez. Bondar looked amazing early. He was lighting up Ronaldo Rodriguez, and then in the second round, he makes a horrible mistake. He engages in the grappling with Ronaldo Rodriguez, who I think took Bondar down. Bondar reverses the position, and I start cheering because I picked Bondar. I'm like, dude, he reversed the position. He got taken down. He's going to get back up to his feet, and he's going to start dominating again. Instead of disengaging, he goes for a leg lock. And basically, in the process of it, gets beat up by Ronaldo Rodriguez, who was punching him while he was going for the leg lock. And the next thing you know, Ronaldo Rodriguez takes his back and subs him. Denise Bondar threw away the fight with the worst fight IQ I've seen throughout the entire fucking year, probably. I can't understand how he made that mistake, dude. It's like you were piecing this dude up on the feet, landing spinning elbows at will. You're able to reverse the position, and you don't choose to disengage. But either way, good win for the debutant Ronaldo Rodriguez. Let's get on to the next fight. Felipe dos Santos, the prospect that I was so high on, loses. No, wait, he actually got the job done. It could have gone either way, but it was a fraud check. Despite Felipe dos Santos winning, we did not see the same guy that showed up to fight Manuel Cap. Now, I understand it was at altitude, but that's not why. Instead of Felipe dos Santos throwing combinations, instead of him sitting behind his jab and his front kick up the middle, his game plan was to throw jumping high kicks, spinning wheel kicks, and overhands to get a big flashy KO early on. And I know Victor Altamirano was making it difficult to engage in the pocket, whereas Manuel Cap is a lot more willing to sit there in the pocket because that's where he likes to fight. But at the same time, dude, it's like, you know, Victor Altamirano wasn't really doing a whole lot on the feet. And it's not like Felipe dos Santos doesn't have a reach advantage. It's not like he doesn't have the ability to throw with a lot of output, but he just wasn't able to put anything together on the feet. He still won the fight, but it was an incredibly disappointing performance after what we saw him do to Manuel Cap on short notice. And he got taken down at will. He got ragdolled in the first round, and he can't stuff a takedown. I don't know. I was disappointed in Felipe dos Santos' performance. I expected to see a total, you know, level showing performance. I thought that Felipe was going to annihilate this guy. Instead, it was a razor close fight that could have went either way, where we saw a completely different version of Felipe dos Santos with no takedown defense on top of that. So I think it was a bit of a fraud check. And then, of course, we also had Naimov. We had Muhammad Naimov and Eric Silva. Muhammad Naimov got the job done via a fluky first round KO because Eric Silva got injured with like some kind of a kick in the first round. And that was it. Honestly, I think I went 6-5 on this card. I didn't do very well. The prelims sucked. The main card was fun. Raul Rosas Jr. pulled out, and now he's on March 2nd's Fight Night card, which is next week, which is actually a pretty good card, honestly. I'm looking forward to seeing him fight Ricky Tercios. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. The prelims, as I said, very slow for this Fight Night. The main event was underwhelming, and the co-main event was fun. Ortega gets beat up in the first, gets knocked down, comes back to win it. I don't think he deserves a title shot, but either way, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time.